Okay, so CNN's Chris Cuomo was secretly recorded having a public confrontation with two strangers. And if you didn't happen to see the video, here are the quick bullet points. So Chris was out in public having a bite to eat with his wife and his daughter, and at some point, two strangers engaged Chris, started an argument, and repeatedly called him Fredo, as in Fredo from the Godfather franchise. And if you remember the Godfather franchise, Fredo was the family embarrassment. He was the least attractive, he was the dumbest, the most traitorous of the Corleone brothers. So Chris, who's of Italian-American descent, took exception, and he had a strong reaction. And to paraphrase his reaction, he basically says, calling somebody Fredo, who happens to be Italian, is like calling them the N-word. Okay, so the misconnection here is that Chris is making a big false equivalence. He's comparing the insult of being called a fictitious character with a racial slur that has a horrible legacy behind it. Okay, so reconnecting the dots, I think it's pretty clear what happened. These two clowns were trying to hurt Chris Cuomo and his family. They were trying to bait him, perhaps, into assaulting them to where he winds up in jail and opens himself up to a lawsuit, perhaps baiting him into saying something silly where his image is tarnished and he falls out of good favor with CNN. That is clear. I don't think anybody should necessarily bang on Chris for being upset. Any alpha male who's confronted by two idiots, you should expect them to have a strong reaction, especially when their family is involved. I think the bigger problem is, or the problem that I have, is when people compare racial apples to racial oranges. Nobody was ever called Fredo and then they looked out their window and they see a burning cross in their lawn. Nobody was ever called Fredo during the commission of a traffic stop with a racist cop. Nobody was ever called Fredo while they were lynched and hanging from a tree. Those are all things very specific and very unique, unfortunately, to the African American experience. So the first thing is, don't be an asshole to guys that almost got your asses whipped by Chris Cuomo. And the second thing is, we should give Chris a pass on this. What he said, misspeaking, wasn't a high crime. We can understand how any man would get defensive when he's being agitated by strangers when he's with his family. But the point I really want to drive home is with matters of race, we must compare racial apples to other racial apples and not the opposite. And the reason why is because in this case, when you have somebody that calls you or insults you by calling you a character like Fredo, and then you compare it to the N-word, what you're really doing, in my opinion, is you're overinflating. You're giving more energy to this, this very, I want to say this trivial insult, and you're really dampening a racial slur that has so much attached to it. It has a horrible legacy and, truthfully, atrocities that carry much more weight than being called a fictitious character.